Hello everyone, please press subscribe, press follow, press the bell so you don't miss any new clips. Alchemy Emperor of the Divine Tao. Author by Flying Alone. Audio novels by Novelist. Chapter 171. Treatment. Ling Han did not take it to heart. There was a flash of delight in his eyes that no one else noticed. It was not a snake that had bitten Wu Qianfeng, but a treasure. Of course, he could not confirm it yet. However, he was quite sure that it was the case. Come, change your position and lay your leg down flat, Ling Han instructed. Wu Qianfeng quickly sat down and laid his leg down on another chair. He then looked at Ling Han anxiously. There was no way that a great alchemist like Xuanhuan would make empty boasts. Thus, when he said that Ling Han's alchemy skills were even above his, then that had to be the truth, even if that was a very astonishing fact that he really couldn't believe. Everyone else now had become minor characters as they all directed their stares at Ling Han, an unbelievably young man with unbelievable skills. Ling Han did not feel uncomfortable at all. In his last life, he was already long used to becoming the focus of everyone's attention. What he wanted now was to confirm the idea he had in his mind. He stretched out a hand and tapped repeatedly on Wu Qianfeng's leg. After every few taps, he would stop and observe for a moment. After a moment, a confident smile came over his face as he said, "Old Wu, I'm going to start the treatment now. However, it will be very painful. Please don't worry, young Master Han. I am a practitioner of martial arts, so what hardships have I not experienced before? Please do as you like, young Master Han. I can." Wu Qianfeng was just getting impassioned talking about his pain tolerance when all of a sudden, he let out an agonized yell. A powerful crimson flame suddenly appeared on Ling Han's palm that transformed into a sharp point that was currently burning Wu Qianfeng's skin. Xuanhuan was watching from the side, and sighed ruefully. Young Master Han is indeed extremely fortunate to be able to fuse with a strange fire. I am about to die from envy. In front of Ling Han, there was naturally no need for him to act all high and mighty. Strange fire. When the others heard this, the majority of them were confused. Only Wu Qianfeng looked astonished. He naturally knew what strange fire was. This thing was extremely rare, and by itself, it possessed great power. But to actually refine it? Sorry, even the current Reign Emperor may not be able to accomplish such an extraordinary feat. Perhaps only that mysterious old monster from the Qi clan would be able to subdue a strange fire. Ling Han was only an element-gathering tier. How had he managed such a feat? Wu Qianfeng definitely did not believe that Ling Han had managed to fuse with a strange fire all on his own ability. Then it was very simple. It must have been the master behind Ling Han or his clan that had helped him to fuse with a strange fire. A party that could retrieve a strange fire and allow one of their juniors to fuse with it, how abominably generous was that? As his thoughts turned in this direction, Wu Qianfeng could not help but feel gratitude towards Xuanhuan. The matter just now had become too serious. Putting aside the problem of his treatment, merely Ling Han's terrifying background was not something that the Wu clan would be able to stand against. His thoughts flashed through his mind, and he once again released a horrible scream. Just now, he had been distracted and had managed to momentarily forget the agonizing pain. But now, the pain made a comeback, driving him practically crazy enough that he wanted to beat someone up. Hiss. The people surrounding them all revealed expressions of utter shock, because they actually saw one vein after another all reveal themselves on Wu Qianfeng's leg. Upon a closer look, these veins were actually continuously twisting around as if they were a group of very slender snakes. Ling Han gave a humph. His fingers continuously touched, pressed and pushed. With the burning of the flames, these slender snakes kept retreating and finally converged around the ankle. Wu Qianfeng's thigh was visibly regaining the color of normal skin at a detectable speed. As the black color continuously moved downwards, it became darker and darker, as if it was about to turn solid and gush out of his leg. It was really very strange. However, Wu Qianfeng looked elated at this. Even if he was an idiot, he could tell that Ling Han did have his ways, and was slowly forcing the poison in his body to accumulate in his foot. But it was really painful. Very painful. Extremely painful. As a spiritual ocean tier elite, Wu Qianfeng still had a very high pain tolerance. By now, he could already force himself not to let out any moans of pain. However, layer after layer of cold sweat appeared on his skin, and both his legs were endlessly quivering. By this point, all the black color had converged into the sole of his foot. Ling Han drew his sword, and said, "Old Wu, I have now forced all the poison into your left foot. Everything would be all right after I amputate your foot. Is that fine?" "Fine, your sister. This is one of my feet we're talking about here." Wu Qianfeng mocked internally. However, he had visited many doctors previously, and they had all advised him to amputate his whole left leg to be able to preserve his life. In comparison, merely cutting off his left foot was already a much better bargain. After all, his life was important, and it would only become more and more troublesome if he continued to drag it out. Young Master Han, please do it," Wu Qianfeng said, gritting his teeth. Ling Han drew his sword, and sure, a cold flash passed. Immediately, black-colored blood sprayed out. He did not cut off Wu Qianfeng's foot, but merely made an incision in the sole of his foot to let out blood. With the continuous urging of the strange fire, black blood gushed out endlessly. "Here it comes." Ling Han's eyes suddenly lit up. He quickly dropped his sword and stretched out a hand towards the fountain of black blood. Then, he immediately drew back his hand. No one noticed that there was an additional something in his hand, because he had immediately stored the item into the spatial ring. The black blood was continuously forced out, and very quickly, Wu Qianfeng's left leg had completely returned to normal. However, it still looked a bit pale. After all, Wu Qianfeng had lost a lot of blood. "It's done," Ling Han said. Wu Qianfeng sensed for a moment, and an expression of uncontrollable elation appeared on his face. He hurriedly stood and raised his clasped hands in Ling Han's direction and said, "Many thanks, young Master Han. Many thanks, young Master Han." This venom had troubled him for many years. There was no hint of recovery even after he had taken many different types of medicine that were supposed to heal poison. Every day, he had to use his origin power to suppress the poison. If not, the poison would make its way upwards and absorb his blood. If it was not because of this poison, he would not still be in the 7th layer of spiritual ocean tier now. Instead, he would have managed to reach the 9th layer, with a high chance to break through to spiritual pedestal tier. If the clashing yang pill still had no effects, he was indeed preparing to give up his left leg. After all, a living man who had lost a leg was still much better than a dead man who had all his limbs. He had never thought that Ling Han would so easily manage to solve a problem that had troubled him for almost 10 years. "Amazing. Cover up that hairy leg of yours. Do you think it looks very nice?" Ling Han said disdainfully. By now, Wu Qianfeng's leg was scorched black in some places, and those places that were not burnt were covered with body hair. It was indeed a disgusting sight. Yes. Wu Qianfeng was currently very elated, so he ignored Ling Han's extremely rude tone. "All right. You may go now." Ling Han flicked his hand, and issued the command for them to leave. "Yes." Wu Qianfeng quickly raised his clasped hands in farewell. As he continuously made his apologies to the members of the Jiang clan, he picked up the 3 juniors of his clan. Since the poison was now cured, he naturally did not need to beg Xuanhuan for any favors. Thus, he directly returned home. "You return too," Ling Han said to Xuanhuan. "Yes, young Master Han." At first, Xuanhuan was planning to flatter him a bit more, but when he recalled that Ling Han was currently staying in the Imperial City and would definitely come over to the Heaven's Medicine Pavilion frequently, he did not continue to bother him and took his leave. Now that the outsiders were gone, the members of the Jiang clan all looked at Ling Han with reverence. Ling Han smiled, and asked, "What is it? Do you not know me anymore?" "I do indeed feel like I don't know you anymore," Jin Wuji said with a bitter smile. Even Grandmaster Xuanhuan and Master Wu had to show you utmost respect. I am really at a loss what to do. How about if I call you young Master Han as well? Go to hell. Ling Han laughed loudly. Do you not take me as a friend? All of a sudden, Jin Wuji felt a warmth spread out in his heart. Alchemy Emperor of the Divine Tao. Chapter 172. Blood-sucking origin gold. Becoming friends with Ling Han before and later, the significance of the two scenarios were completely different. Even a black-grade middle-level alchemist had to address Ling Han respectfully as young Master Han. What an honor it was to be able to become Ling Han's friend. Jiang Fei Yan's parents and Jiang Fei Yan herself were all extraordinarily delighted by his words. Meanwhile, eldest aunt and youngest aunt both shamelessly approached Ling Han. Eldest aunt said, "Young Master Han, my Hua Lian and Yuan are both good boys. They will definitely be able to become good friends with young Master Han." That's right. That's right. You can all become good friends, youngest aunt hurriedly continued. They were really without any sense of shame. Ling Han asked calmly, "Do I know you?" Eldest aunt and youngest aunt were instantly struck speechless by his question. If it was just a moment ago, they would definitely have bared their fangs and brandished their claws. Yet now, they dared not say even one word. Instead, they continued to signal at Jiang Fei Yan with their eyes, hoping that she could speak up on their behalf. If their sons could become good friends with Ling Han, then wouldn't that mean that they would be able to do as they liked in this imperial city? You all can get lost now, Ling Han said impatiently. How could eldest aunt and youngest aunt give up as easily as that? They simply pretended that they had not heard him, and planned to continue pestering Ling Han. Ling Han smiled coldly, and said, "Or do you want me to invite Wu Qianfeng and Yuanchu back to call an account to your old debts?" Sparing him once was already him giving face to Jin Wuji. If not, he would have given them both a well-deserved slap long ago. Hearing his threat, eldest aunt and youngest aunt could only reluctantly leave with their sons in tow. Ling Han retook his seat and continued to drink with Jin Wuji and the rest for a while before taking his leave. Firstly, the atmosphere was not too comfortable. His status had all of a sudden shot up to such formidable heights that it caused Jin Wuji and the others to behave very reservedly in his company. Secondly, he was also in a rush to return and study the item that he had gotten from Wu Qianfeng. With Hu Niu in tow, Ling Han very quickly returned to the academy. Faced with a challenging look from Lu Ru'er, he closed the door to his room. With a single thought from him, an item immediately appeared from within the spatial ring. It was a very black thing, thin and long. Once it appeared, it actually moved a little before quickly shooting towards Ling Han, as if it was an arrow shot from a bow. The thing was extremely fast, so fast that even Wu Qianfeng could not defend himself against it, causing him to stagnate at the current cultivation level for a period of 10 years. This more than showed how fast it could be. Even an elite warrior of the 7th layer of spiritual ocean tier was not spared, what more Ling Han who was merely in the 7th layer of element gathering tier. Ziu, the thing had already shot to Ling Han's waist, and was actually about to penetrate his body through his waist. Heng, Ling Han's face turned cold, and suddenly, a burst of crimson flame erupted from his waist. How dare you? Since I had the ability to force you out, how could it be possible that I would be afraid of you? The thing continued to shoot in various directions, still intending to create a hole on Ling Han's body to allow it to enter his body. However, its attempts were repeatedly blocked by the strange fire, and it was finally captured by Ling Han once again. Hong! The strange fire came forth and began burning the thing. The thing continued to twist around and struggle. It actually transformed from its initial long, thin shape to the shape of a block, then transformed into the form of a sword, then a saber, and so on. It was an amazing sight. So it is indeed blood-sucking origin gold. Ling Han smiled. The blood-sucking origin gold was not a demonic beast nor any kind of living organism. In fact, it was a unique kind of metal. However, this metal was extremely strange because it loved to suck and devour blood, as if it had a life of its own. Not even Ling Han possessed a detailed knowledge of this thing. But someone had once guessed before that when this strange metal absorbed a sufficient amount of blood strong enough, it might be able to open the door to life and become a completely new life form. And the greatest advantage of this metal was that it could freely change its form. Once it was forged into a weapon, the weapon would be able to change into uncountable forms. In Ling Han's last life, the slashing sun saber, the weapon of one of the 7 ultimate warriors of heaven tier, the setting sun saber emperor, was forged precisely from this blood-sucking origin gold. In battle, the treasured saber would be able to continuously absorb the blood of powerful warriors to endlessly increase its power. It was practically able to compare to the might of an ultimate warrior of heaven tier on its own. That was how terrifying it could be. However, this block of blood-sucking origin gold was much too small to forge it into a weapon. Still, there would be no problems in using it to make a key. Since it could freely change its shape, that meant that it would be able to become a key that could open any lock in this world. That wasn't awesome enough. In his last life, Ling Han had only seen the blood-sucking origin gold in the hands of the setting sun saber emperor, but when he'd heard Wu Qianfeng's story, he deduced the identity of the snake. Otherwise, how could he have treated the ailment of a member of the Wu clan without any reason? Thankfully, he was not disappointed. Yeah. The strange fire sent a blurry thought to Ling Han. It actually wanted to continue melting this block of metal. Ling Han could somewhat sense that the strange fire felt disdain towards the blood-sucking origin gold. It was really strange. Once it was melted, would the strange fire be able to gain the transformation trait of the blood-sucking origin gold? But if he did not melt it down, the thing would not listen to him at all. Its bloodthirsty nature was overwhelming. It was appropriate to forge a weapon from it, but it was definitely not recommended to forge it into a key. Burn and melt it down. He'll just have to see if that would be able to erase its bloodthirsty nature. Ling Han made his decision and allowed the strange fire to continuously refine this block of blood-sucking origin gold. However, since the blood-sucking origin gold could gain the favor of the setting sun saber emperor who used it to forge his own weapon, it did indeed have a very high tolerance against heat. It only became slightly red under the furious burning of the strange fire but did not melt at all. If it was not for the fact that fire was strong against metal, Ling Han probably would not be able to do anything to it. Then he'd just have to slowly melt it down. He did not believe that he would be unable to subdue a block of metal. Ling Han sat down in a cross-legged position and stimulated the origin power in his body, transforming it into heat that helped in the refining process of the blood-sucking origin gold. Slowly, this block of unique metal began to become softer and softer, and gradually looked like it would be turning into liquid. That slashing sun saber of the setting sun saber emperor was far above this level. That treasured saber was practically invincible against all external damage. Even the sword emperor who had learnt sword art and claimed to be able to slice the heavens and the earth apart with a single wave of his sword could not break it in half. That proved how extraordinary a substance it was. The reason for this should be because the blood-sucking origin gold had the ability to grow. It would be able to become stronger through the continuous absorption of blood. Currently, this block of blood-sucking origin gold had not absorbed too much blood. As a result, it could not do anything against even a martial artist of the 7th layer of spiritual ocean tier. A whole 10 years, and it still had not managed to completely absorb the blood of its victim, which was proof enough of its weakness. Otherwise, if it was that slashing sun saber of the setting sun saber emperor, then Ling Han would definitely have turned and fled in the opposite direction. How could he stand against that demonic thing with his current ability? The block of metal continued to change shapes, and had even transformed into the shape of a tiny human being that roared silently. This would cause anyone to suspect if it was actually a metal that had a life of its own. However, living organisms could not be stored into the spatial ring, so it was confirmed that the blood-sucking origin gold was an inanimate object. Anyways, it was just very strange. After melting it down for a whole day and night, the block of blood-sucking origin gold finally became a pool of liquid and no longer changed forms. Ling Han's face turned serious, and he began to extend his divine sense into the blood-sucking origin gold. To make the blood-sucking origin gold take a form of his choosing, he would have to use his divine sense to penetrate into it. It was equivalent to smelting and forging the blood-sucking origin gold like it was a spirit weapon. When Ling Han's divine sense suddenly entered into a world of complete darkness. The furious sounds of battle roared in his ears. As the sight in front of him became lighter, he saw uncountable people all attacking a giant in front of him. The giant stood firm and sturdy, and there was a metallic sheen all over its body. It was extremely hard, because even with the combined attacks of a few thousand people, there only appeared slight depressions on its body, which immediately turned back to normal. It was as if the depressions were made by fingers lightly pressing down on its body. Ling Han was shocked. The body of this giant was completely made from the blood-sucking origin gold. Alchemy Emperor of the Divine Tao. Chapter 173. A State of Enlightenment. Even with the might the setting sun saber emperor had, he had only managed to obtain a block of blood-sucking origin gold that was about the size of a human head. He had forged it into his famous weapon, the slashing sun saber, on which he relied to become the third strongest existence among the 7 ultimate warriors of heaven tier. But there actually appeared a firm and sturdy giant here that was completely made from the blood-sucking origin gold. Wasn't that a terrifying fact? Ling Han had guessed before that once this blood-sucking origin gold had managed to absorb enough blood, it would be able to transform into a living being, but he had never imagined that there would appear such a terrifying giant. There were millions of martial artists ganging up on this giant of blood-sucking origin gold. Their combined attacks shot towards it like they were shooting stars and continuously blasted against the body of the giant. But there were very few attacks that could actually break through its defenses. Even those few attacks that managed to get through its defenses only managed to leave behind light marks on its body. However, the counterattack of the giant of origin gold was really too horrifying. It only opened its mouth and would be able to swallow down a large number of martial artists. It then closed its mouth, and a crisp catcher was heard. It had actually swallowed the human martial artists whole. Since these martial artists could soar in the skies, they had definitely reached at least the level of flower blossoming tier, and based on Ling Han's observation, some of them were even above this level and could match him in ability in his last life. A few of these powerful martial artists were even above his level in his last life. Shattering Void tier. It was at this moment that the images came to a sudden stop. Ling Han's vision changed and he had once again returned to his own room. That flash of images previously should have been the remaining pieces of memory remaining in this block of blood-sucking origin gold. However, because it was just a shattered piece, there was only a short flash of images. Ling Han could not help but engage in deduction. The giant of origin gold was finally defeated and shattered by the combined attacks of uncountable powerful warriors, and now its pieces were scattered all over the world. The blood-sucking origin gold was filled with the ability to absorb blood. Could it be that the giant was planning on making a comeback? Though he had only witnessed a short flash of memories, when he recalled that the giant of blood-sucking origin gold was something that could attract so many martial artists to work together and attack it, that was definitely proof of its unbelievable might and power. There were even a few ultimate warriors of Shattering Void tier mixed in the fray. If this thing could still come back to life, then who in this world would be able to stop it? That would definitely be a scene of total death and carnage. However, this should have happened in an ancient historical time. Merely from the scene that Ling Han had witnessed, there were hundreds of elite warriors in Heaven tier, and there were no less than 5 ultimate warriors of Shattering Void tier. How the world of martial arts must have prospered then. Hold on, Jiang Yue Feng and at least about 100 of elite warriors of Heaven tier had also battled an ultimate warrior of Shattering Void tier to death. That was not far from his current time period. It was as if the field of martial arts suddenly experienced a boom, and all of a sudden, many people managed to break through to Heaven tier. Ling Han was even more curious, and wanted to know about what had actually happened in that period of history. However, Rain Country had only been established for a few thousand years, and before that, it seemed as if there was a blank space in history. No one knew how the world was like before that. Looks like he would have to leave Rain Country and step into the wider world to be able to find out what had happened during that unknown period of history. Ling Han gathered his scattered thoughts. It was pointless to ponder further about it. What could his current cultivation level of merely the 7th layer of element gathering tier do? If there was really any kind of major catastrophe, there would be someone else stronger stepping up to the fore. Rain Country was only a small place, so the strongest existence here was only in flower blossoming tier. Who knows, when he left this place, it may not be a strange thing for him to hear of people who had actually reached the level of shattering void tier. The world changed and the field of martial arts was also constantly changing. There were times of prosperity, and there were also times of decline. A mental command from him, and the blood-sucking origin gold instantly transformed into various shapes with the stimulation of his mental commands. It could transform into metallic threads that were as thin as a spider's thread. It could also transform into metallic sheets that were thinner than even paper. It could also transform into the shape of a pig, goat, chicken, dog, and various other animals, though they were all tiny in size. Moreover, through the refining process of the strange fire, the blood-sucking origin gold had become even tougher and more durable. Even elites of spiritual pedestal tier would probably find it difficult to tear it apart. If he actually managed to coil it around the neck and give it a tug in a surprise attack, then even elite warriors of spiritual pedestal tier may die. He formed the blood-sucking origin gold into the shape of a bangle and placed it on his left wrist. When he came out of his room, Xuanhuan instantly clung onto him and rubbed her little head on his chest, and said, "Mean." "Ling Han, mean. How am I mean?" Ling Han asked, smiling. "You don't play with Niu." The little girl pouted. Ling Han could not help but laugh, and said, all right. Then I'll just have to play with you for a while, all right." The play that Xuanhuan was saying was actually wrestling. It must have been taught by her mother tiger, when she had still been in the tiger's den. Every move and stance, every attack and retreat were all signature moves of a tiger on the hunt for its prey. However, Xuanhuan possessed a terrifying comprehension ability in martial arts, and managed to adapt the moves that were not suitable to be used by human beings to her own use. The little girl was like a little tiger. She would pounce, smack, bite, and throw. Every move possessed a terrifying power behind it. Ling Han could not help but watch in captivation. There was no limit and restriction to the form of martial arts in the first place. Who had decided that a beast could not become a master and teach one martial arts? On the other hand, the ape's arm fists, tiger form palms, and others, weren't they all martial arts techniques that had been invented based on their ancestors' observation of the attacks of other animals? All of a sudden, his thoughts spread out, and his mindset was freed to a far-reaching world. He had entered a state of enlightenment. Enlightenment was a special condition that martial artists desperately desired to experience. Under this condition, they could possibly comprehend certain dilemmas of martial arts that they normally would not have been able to comprehend, and their level of martial arts may soar. However, this condition could only be encountered by chance, and not brought about consciously. According to deduction, it required the consciousness of a martial artist to be coordinated with the heavens and earth, so it was extremely mysterious. If a martial artist managed to enter the state of enlightenment once in his lifetime, that would be enough for him to thank the gods for this gift. Moreover, it would normally happen after one had reached flower blossoming tier, because only those who had cast off their mortal bodies would be qualified to achieve unity with the Tao of heaven and earth. In his last life, Ling Han had experienced enlightenment 3 times in total, but he had only managed to experience breakthroughs in alchemy. And the first time he experienced it was when he was in spiritual ocean tier. At that time, he was unbearably shocked, but he had never thought that it would appear even earlier in this lifetime. The surrounding spiritual chi all around him converged upon him, as if it had turned into multiple dragons that were furiously squeezing into his body. His cultivation level immediately began to spike, from the middle period of the 7th layer of element gathering tier to the late period, and then to the peak period. He did not have any problems with comprehension of his cultivation level at all. He merely experienced a slight pause and the door to the 8th layer of element gathering tier was open to him. Breaking through was that easy for him. Ling Han had not noticed at all. His heart and spirit were soaring in the world of martial arts. Every single bit of comprehension bloomed in front of him as if they were flowers. But when he reached out his hand to capture them, they immediately shattered into shadows. Illusion flowers flying in the air, or so he has heard. In the air, there were also multiple flashes of mysterious essences of martial arts flying past like they were shooting stars. Yet these were even harder to catch hold of. These were the Tao of nature, and were not something that the current Ling Han would be able to comprehend at all. If it was not for the fact that he had the support of his status as an elite warrior of heaven tier from his last life, he would only be at a complete loss in this world of martial arts. Yet now, he had managed to catch a glimpse of the mysteries of martial arts. From the early period of the 8th layer of element gathering tier to the middle period, to the late period, to the peak period. He used a mere few hours to accumulate the energy that he would have needed to accumulate over quite a considerable number of days. He did not even need to take any alchemical pills at all. It was as if the heavens had directly contributed to his advancement. As the saying goes, once you understood Tao, you would be granted salvation. Of course, Ling Han was still very far from reaching this level, but his advancement was more than enough to attract the jealousy of others. Hong, his body gave a slight tremble and he had stepped into the 9th layer of element gathering tier. Ling Han's eyes suddenly snapped open. At first, he looked slightly confused, but then came back to reality. He could not help but smile. He turned around to see that Hu was seated by his side, imitating his posture, as if she was also cultivating. There was actually a sliver of seriousness on her little face. Peng, peng, peng. It was at this moment that a hurried knocking was heard from the door. Alchemy Emperor of the Divine Tao. Chapter 174. Feng Luo's Act of Violence. Ling Han went over to open the door and saw that it was Zhu Zuyi at the door. She was currently in a great state of anxiety and panic. Big brother Ling. Zhu Zuyi immediately greeted, as if she had finally managed to gain a pillar of support the moment her eyes set upon Ling Han. Instantly, her worried demeanor relaxed considerably. What's happened? Ling Han asked. The academy expelled Li Hao. Zhu Zuyi said furiously. What? Ling Han frowned. Has he committed some crime? No. Zhu Zuyi shook her head, and forced out through gritted teeth, it's Feng Luo. He brought with him a teacher of the academy, and expelled Li Hao from the academy for no reason at all. He even said that it was because Li Hao was a friend of Big Brother Ling. Instantly, Ling Han's eyes became as sharp as swords, as rage slowly rose in his heart. Feng Luo is really out of control. He had his lackeys injure Li Hao and force him to lower his head, and the teacher from the academy actually pretended he had not seen anything at all. When I saw things were getting worse, I immediately rushed over to you and hope that you can uphold the justice for Li Hao. Zhu Zuyi said, crying. If he was really expelled from the academy, then Li Hao would never be able to hold his head high again when he returned. Moreover, his future prospects would become extremely limited. Ling Han revealed a strong fury in his demeanor. He had already expected that Feng Yan and his brother would seek him out for revenge, and he did not have any fear. As a martial artist, how could it be possible if he would not offend a few people in his lifetime? Yet Feng Luo actually targeted his friends. That was too shameless. Whatever the enmity, family members should never be dragged into the matter. That was the unwritten rule of martial artists. Unless it was some kind of life or death enmity that could not be dissolved, only then would one actually make the move to eliminate the whole clan of his foe, or even include anyone else that had the slightest bit of relation to him. The enmity between him and Feng Luo, at best, was only a minor conflict. Bring me to them, Ling Han said darkly. Zhu Zuyi was delighted, and hurriedly brought Ling Han with her to Li Hao's quarters. She had seen how the third imperial prince and his guests had treated Ling Han at the Cherishing Flower Pavilion, so she believed that if Ling Han were to act, then things could still be redeemed. The two of them were in a rush, so very quickly, they arrived at the students' hostel. This was where the ordinary disciples lived. Unlike true disciples, who had a courtyard to themselves, a few ordinary disciples would share a single courtyard, and the treatment was completely different. Feng Luo had made a comeback and was unbearably arrogant, making no attempts to hide his actions at all. On the other hand, he wanted nothing more than to inform everyone in the academy of it, to let him see how impressive and mighty he was now. Thus, there was a large number of people watching the scene. Some were sympathetic, some were rejoicing in Li Hao's misfortune, while others were completely indifferent. Any circle would be able to show the multiple facets of human nature. In the middle of the crowd, Li Hao was already covered with injuries and lying on the ground. Feng Luo had one foot firmly stepping on Li Hao's face, and Li Hao's fingers were visibly entrenched deeply into the ground beneath him. It was obvious to the rest how furious he was at this moment. Ling Han's eyes were like swords of ice. As he strode forwards, those around seemed to be able to sense his current rage. They turned around, and when they saw the icy expression on his face, they subconsciously retreated a few steps, and opened up a path for him to pass through. This also included the few students who were in gushing spring tear. They were both surprised and confused about how they could be scared off by a fellow student merely in element gathering tear. The crowd separated like flowing water, and a direct path to the center of the crowd appeared. Feng Luo immediately turned around and looked to find that it was Ling Han. A sliver of arrogance appeared on his face. He smiled cockily, and said, "Ling Han, did you see? I have returned." Ling Han did not say anything. He merely continued his advance without pause. "Ha ha ha ha. Are you extremely displeased? So what if you are? I want you to be very displeased." Feng Luo smirked coldly, and deliberately rubbed his foot on Li Hao's face a few times. "This is your friend? Then I'm really sorry. I did everything on purpose. Don't say that I didn't give him a chance." Feng Luo shrugged, and continued, "I told him that as long as he cut off all relations with you from now onwards, and announced all the evil acts and crimes you have committed in public, then I would let him off. Who knew that this brat would be so stubborn and so stupidly loyal that he was actually not willing to betray you? AI, the kind of person I hate the most would be this kind of unreasonable idiot, so I could only thrash him until he will admit the error of his ways. Don't worry, there could not be so many idiots in this world. In future, I will go seek out Li Dongyue, Jin Wuji and the others, and I believe that they would not be as stupid as this." Feng Luo paused, and when he saw the ice-cold expression on Ling Han's face, he felt great delight. The more humiliated Ling Han was, the happier he would be. In fact, he wanted nothing more than to give a few furious stomps on that face of his. "What is it? Do you want to step on me? Unfortunately, you will not be able to. Just take a look. My brother had his 4 great guardian deities come over to become my guards, and all of them are in gushing spring tear. Forcing you into submission would be a piece of cake for them. Everyone here is the same. I can beat up anyone I don't like the look of, but none of them would dare to touch a single hair on my head. Come and beat me up, you idiot. If you have the balls to, come thrash me." Feng Luo laughed loudly, obviously very pleased with himself. He did not have any reservations about entering into mocking everyone mode. At this, quite a few people looked furious. It was necessary for rules to be in place in order to restrict anyone's actions at any time. That way, there would be a limit to how far they would go. Yet Feng Luo actually broke these rules. He would be able to thrash anyone he liked. Who would be able to feel safe again? Still, where did he get such overwhelming confidence from? One had to know that even the members of the main branch of the 8 great clans would not dare to say such words, and the imperial family of Rain Country would not say something like that either, as they were the ones who decided the rules, so how could they break their own rules so publicly? What basis did Feng Luo have to say these words? One had to understand that not even Feng Yan was much of anything in the vicinity of the imperial city, what more this kind of spoiled profligate. Hee, don't glare at me like that. I'm very scared. Feng Luo deliberately made a fearful face, but he immediately glared and stomped harshly on Li Hao. Damn, who do you think you are? You're just a lowly dog from Grey Cloud Town, and you still dare to abuse your power in front of me. Today, I will let you understand that opposing me was the most idiotic choice that you have made in this lifetime. I want you to watch as your friend, because of his relationship with you, has his arm crippled by me, and become a cripple forever. After saying so coldly, his right hand holding a sword, his eyes fixed upon Li Hao's right arm, obviously intending to cripple this arm of Li Hao's. For a saber wielder, having the arm that wielded his saber crippled would mean that he would become an absolute cripple. Everyone was shocked. This was the Huyang Academy, and there was obviously a teacher present here, yet Feng Luo actually dared to commit such a violent crime so publicly in front of everyone. Could it be that his Feng clan had become the boss of the academy? Ha 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 ha. Feng Luo laughed loudly, raised his sword and lowered it in a slash. Li Hao! Zhu Zuyi screamed shrilly, grief-stricken. She was filled with anguish, and had already spat out a mouthful of blood in her emotional turmoil. Ziyu! It was at this moment that Ling Han moved swiftly, and his figure shot towards Feng Luo. Get lost! Those 4 young men standing behind Feng Luo all made their own moves. 4 hands attacked in unison, origin power rolled out in a powerful wave, and became 4 huge palms that aimed towards Ling Han. They were 4 elites of gushing spring tier, even though all of them were only in the first layer. However, gushing spring tier would still be gushing spring tier, and would be able to completely suppress an opponent who was merely in element gathering tier, what more when there were 4 of them. Even if they had not used any kind of martial arts technique in their attacks, they were still incomparably powerful. Alchemy Emperor of the Divine Tao. Chapter 175, Ling Han's Rage. A frosty aura emanated from Ling Han as he stepped forwards to parry the attacks of these 4 men. Was he seeking death? The combined attacks of 4 elites of gushing spring tier caused someone who was merely in element gathering tier to actually neither dodge or avoid, but step forwards to receive their attacks head-on. Where did he get such courage from? Peng, 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 peng. A series of blasts were heard, and instantly, the expressions of the observers became utterly astonished. They could only watch as 4 figures were flung outwards from a heavy impact, and who could these 4 figures be but the 4 guardian deities of Feng Yan? Ling Han did not even pause, and had already arrived at a spot right above Feng Luo's head. Pa! And his foot was firmly stomped onto Feng Luo's head. Tong! A muffled sound was heard, and Feng Luo's entire head was firmly pressed into the ground. He was forced to kneel on the ground while his arms were helplessly hanging by his sides and his bottom was raised high, as if it was a chrysanthemum flower about to blossom. W.A. Ling Han's figure dropped down onto the ground, and suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. That was not because he had been injured by the 4 guardian deities. In fact, it was because he had injured himself when he had stepped out earlier on in order to stimulate the lone wolf's blood. He had not had the chance to spit it out earlier on. Dead silence filled the air. A martial artist in element gathering tier actually defeated 4 elites of gushing spring tier, who could actually believe such a feat was possible. Who could accept such a reality? Though Ling Han had indeed suffered some injury and spat out blood, this could not in any way conceal his radiance. That was too awesome, wasn't it? Ling Han finally smiled calmly, and said, now that there is no longer a fly noisily buzzing around, the world has indeed become much more peaceful and quieter. Li Hao. Zhu Zuyi had covered her face earlier, as she could not bear to watch as Li Hao was crippled at Feng Luo's hands. But when she heard the astonished gasps of those around her, she opened her eyes and saw that not only was Li Hao not injured, even Feng Luo was subdued. She could not help but be overjoyed at the turn of events, and rushed over to him. Ling Han helped Li Hao up, and said, I've involved you in this matter. Aren't we friends? Li Hao asked. Ha ha, friends, that's right, we're friends. Ling Hao clapped a hand on Li Hao's shoulder. In the past, he had only felt that he wanted to give a hand to Li Hao on his way to great accomplishment, but after the matter today, he had finally accepted Li Hao as a true friend. For his friends, Ling Hao could become completely crazy. Zuyi, take care of Li Hao. I still have some debts to settle with somebody. Ling Han said darkly. Li Hao had been horribly beaten up, and would at least need about a month to rest and recover from his injuries. Ling Han, do you know what you are doing? The four guardian deities all came towards him, speaking loudly, a powerful, threatening air emanating from all of them. They were only flung out of the battle by the impact, but had not suffered any injuries. Ling Han's eyes swept over them, and said calmly, you all should feel that you are very lucky that this is the academy. That's why I will only cripple you, but will still leave you with your lives. Insolence. The four guardian deities all shouted in unison. This brat was really too outrageously bold. One had to know that although they were flung out of battle with a single move, that was also because they had been too careless, and had underestimated Ling Han's ability. One only had to look at how they were completely unharmed, and would be able to know that they were indeed very powerful martial artists. Let go of young Master Luo. One of the guardian deities said. These four guardian deities had been named respectively as Tiger, Elephant, Panther, and Wolf, and the person who had spoken was the Elephant guardian deity. Oh, now that you mention it, I almost forgot. Ling Han smiled. He used a foot to kick at Feng Luo's bottom and said, this is the master of you four dogs. Come, kneel down and greet your master. What? The four guardian deities glared furiously. He actually wanted them to kneel. What is it? Can't you even kneel down for the sake of your master? Ling Han said calmly as he drew out his sword. Then who knows, if I'm not happy, maybe I would slice off one of his arms in my displeasure. The four guardian deities were all shocked. They had naturally not placed any importance on Feng Luo, but Feng Luo was still Feng Yan's brother. They had already received Feng Yan's command to protect and guard Feng Luo. If Feng Luo was crippled right in front of their eyes, how could they be able to face Feng Yan again? Teacher Yang, this brat intends to commit violence in public. I would like to request Teacher Yang to step forwards to stop him. The wolf guardian deity said to the teacher who had been standing at one side and merely watching as things went on. This teacher Yang was also only in gushing spring tier, but his status was different. The words of a teacher of Huyang Academy would naturally be worth more. Teacher Yang was feeling extremely displeased. Previously, when Feng Luo took advantage of his position to kick Li Hao around and had completely ignored the rules of the academy, he was already very displeased. However, he had received the command to cooperate with Feng Luo in every way he required before he had come, and so could only conceal his displeasure in his heart. When he saw how Ling Han had stomped Feng Luo into the ground, he was actually very pleased, and had secretly praised Ling Han. Yet he never thought that Feng Luo and his accomplices were really too shameless. When it was them breaking the rules, they had pretended he was not present at all, and now that it was others breaking the same rules, they actually pushed him out into this matter. He really did not want to involve himself in this matter, but when he recalled the command he had received earlier on, he could only sigh helplessly and said, Ling Han, it is forbidden to injure others within the academy grounds. Aren't you going to let go of him? When these words were spoken, everyone else instantly erupted in an uproar. What did that mean? Just now, when Feng Luo was going to injure Li Hao grievously, why had he not said such words? Is this still the academy? No, no, no. Is this still the Huyang Academy of Rain Country? Why do I feel as if the academy is now owned by the Feng clan? That's right. Even the imperial princes and princesses have to follow the rules when they are in the academy. Could it be that Feng Yan and Feng Luo are even above the imperial family of Rain Country in status? Hey, I disagree. Me too. They all began to shout loudly. It was Li Hao today, but it could be any of them tomorrow. When there was no restriction enforced on them by the rules, the consequences would be too widespread. Naturally, everyone felt fear and apprehension in face of such a reality. Teacher Yang could not help but become speechless. He had been feeling guilty in the first place, and now, he naturally was unable to present a righteous front. On one side, he had his orders, but on the other, he also had his own ethics to conform to. As his orders and ethics came into a conflict, he finally sighed and said, I am not going to take control of this matter anymore. He directly turned around and left, and was really not planning on getting involved in this issue anymore. The 4 guardian deities were all ashen, and humphed at his actions. Ling Han, what do you want in order to release young Master Luo? The elephant guardian deity asked. Ling Han merely glanced at him, then said, that's easy. He caused severe injuries to my friend, and even intended to slice off one of his arms. Then I will beat him half dead, and slice off both his arms. That's all. You're going too far, the wolf guardian deity shouted furiously. Ling Han smiled calmly, and said, I'm the type of person who will seek revenge for the smallest grievance. Anyone who breaks one of my fingers, I will break his arm in vengeance. I have only doubled the punishment this time round, so that is already pretty merciful of me. You dare. The 4 guardian deities all charged towards Ling Han at the same time. They wanted to create a storm of attacks that would make Ling Han not have the chance to make a move on Feng Luo. As long as they managed to rescue Feng Luo, Ling Han was only in element gathering tier, so no matter how strange he was, how far could he go? Ling Han's foot gave a flick, and Feng Luo immediately emerged from the ground. He picked Feng Luo up and waved him around as if he was a weapon to parry the attacks of the 4 guardian deities. When he used this human weapon, the 4 guardian deities naturally dared not press their attack any further and quickly stepped back. At this moment, a young man merely in element gathering tier was seen to be greatly showing off his might, forcing 4 elites of gushing spring tier to retreat pathetically, not daring to parry even a single attack. Despicable. Shameless. The 4 guardian deities all shouted angrily. End of the chapter. Alchemy Emperor of the Divine Tao will be read in 5 chapters for every Monday, Wednesday, Friday and Sunday. Please leave this sound novel and press subscribe, follow, and the bell so you don't miss any new clips as well. See you.